I'm Billy Khanyiso Dakada, born and bred in Queenstown. I started my career as an actor at a very, very early age, as far as 1975. Then after that, I was discovered by Boiki Muhlame, Gibson Kente. I then went on to work with Market Theatre in Johannesburg, with Mtobi Motlauze in Lakchonilanga, with the likes of Maralo, with the likes of Sibongile Khumalo, Owen Sijake, Patrick Shai, and quite a number of other actors whom I met them while I was busy at the State Theatre doing theatre in education. As I was born in Queenstown, I grew up as a young boy learning from Kwanonesi in Queenstown, Nonesi Primary School. From Nonesi Primary School, I went on to Fankola. From Fankola, I went on to Nkwanka, where I was forced to join the young youth as against the apartheid education. I was then shot in Queenstown on the 13th of September when we were marching against the death of Stephen Bantu Biko. By profession, I'm an actor and a political activist. I was in prison on many different occasions, being detained for students' politics. But I joined drama groups, which I thought arts and culture, it's one of the weapons that we can use to dethrone and overthrow the state. And after that, I was amongst the students who were repeatedly arrested, and as such, I was shot on my right hand leg. As far as I am today, I am still crippled, having all those wounds of apartheid, but that did not deter my spirit to fight against the apartheid government until it was abolished in my country. During the uprising of Queenstown against the Bantu education, you know, when we confronted the system with the dustbins and stones, one would never believe that we were shot at during the night with AK-47, with tear gas, and as such, in that massacre, so many people were killed, including Lenare Moriane, who was my neighbor, my close friend. And, you know, we've been together at school for many, many years. And that Queenstown massacre in 1977, it left a mark, and it left a mark that cannot be destroyed in the history making of our freedom in South Africa. You know, Queenstown, it's a place where arts and culture, it's inborn in terms of acting, in terms of music, in terms of craft. But during the period of apartheid, artists were very much oppressed by the system, because the system knew exactly that our voice was much more stronger than the AK-47 that they were using against. But though they were using the AK-47 to suppress our feelings, but we made it a point that we will overcome them. That is why this country today, it's where it is. It's through the voice of the oppressed artists. It's through the voice of the oppressed actors. You know, Queenstown, it's a place where struggle was given birth to youth as young as at an early age, you know, and the way the police were so brutally, some of our comrades, they disappeared during the Queenstown first uprising in 1976, 1977. It was worse when Stephen Bantu Biko was killed. And during his funeral, there was a mass action throughout the country because we have never expected such a leader could be killed the way in which Stephen Bantu Biko was transported, being naked from Port Elizabeth to Pretoria, being chained behind the Land Rover. And still today, his death is still a big question. Yes, I would remember Mbusi, Lerumo, Monlebachi, Sipho Maglidolo. You know, during our youth days, we were that vibrant youth who would love to listen to OJs. Where would our country and the world would be by the year 2000? You know, we used to play Teddy Pendergrass. As well as we were youth, we used to like, young girls. I remember my first girlfriend and my first lover was Zoliswa Sindelo, whom we have two great sons. That is Ubulilani Sindelo and then Asanda Sindelo. You know, those were the days I will never forget in my life when you used to stay with the likes of Stompy Mavi, the likes of Victor Mashibini, who were our mentors, Joza Maliti, and the rest. You know, there were bands like Era, Shockwaves, and Queenstown gave birth to one of talent that could never be underestimated. You would think that during that period of apartheid, there were also meetings against the regime. That's where the ANC, the Pan-Africanist Congress, would meet to discuss a way forward, you know, to advance the cause of their struggle. But arts and culture was a cornerstone of entertainment around that township. At some point, there was a very sad funeral of Mongezi Feza, who died in exile. And during his funeral, the police were all over. There were only 20 people who were allowed to attend that kind of a funeral. It was very much sad when his wife from abroad ended up in police station without even attending the funeral of her husband. You know, Queenstown is a very, very good place. Malawana, you would think of Cebo, you would think of Margaret Mcingana, you would think of many, many, many artists who passed away without even enjoying the fruits of the freedom they fight and fought for. You know, I so hope the youth of today, particularly the present youth who is glued with drugs, crime, could learn from the young and old generation of that era so that they can be able to be in a position to pick up that spear and continue to fight as Comrade Chris Hani did, Stephen Bantu Biko did, Lenare Moriane, Lerumo, and a number of young artists and politicians who died at an early age for the love of the freedom of their country. You know, during my time, one of the people who mentored me musically and artistically is the great Stompy Mavi, who used to work with Era, with Shockwaves, with Zola Sishuba, you know, with Cebo, you know. But Queenstown, rich as it is culturally, it's one of the places I am scared to be in today because of fear of starvation, Stompie Mavi had to leave Queenstown and come and stay in Mthatha. As well as he became more progressive and more famous because he was the artist who was close to the poor people. He was the artist of the people. He was the artist who had love for his country. I then discovered that Mthatha is one of the places around OR Tambo which could be in a position to develop me. I want to thank people like Mike Sodo, Braskin Sipoko, with whom he called me from Queenstown to come and work in Mthatha. As an artist in Queenstown, it's not very easy to be successful. It's quite challenging, though it is a small town, unlike Mthatha, which is small but have many opportunities of development. On my arrival in Mthatha, when I followed people like Stompie Mavi, I find myself developing more than any other time I was at home. Though in Queenstown I wrote plays like Naked Hour, My Daughter, My Lover, and my arrival in Mthatha, I wrote Rivonia Trial, reflecting to the Rivonia trialist during the time of apartheid. And that show was well received. And I also wrote another play reflecting to the past struggle of our country. That is the name of the production, The Pain. The Pain was a reflection of the past. How Solomon Mahlangu, how Tsietsi Mashinini, how Stephen Bantubiko influenced the youth to take up stones and fight against the apartheid. Through all that, arts and culture was the greatest weapon that was used during our period. You would remember in a case of Asinamali, Sarafina, The Pillar, there are a number of productions which were banned by the apartheid system. But above all, there is one hero whom I cannot be able to forget in my life, Gibson Kente, who was the father of the African theater. Wherever you go in this country, one would never miss the productions like How Long, Poor Mama and the Load, Schoolgirl and the Taximan. Some of the things or the productions that Plakipo wrote during those years are a reflection of what is happening in our society today.
Go.
Gibson Kente, Prakip, as we used to call him, is the father of the Black Theatre, was the father of the Black Theatre in terms of protest in South Africa. He have managed to produce great actors like Victor Mashibini, like the late Ndaba Mhlongo, Mary Twala. His plays would appeal to every South African. And then he was one of the most hated writers by the apartheid system because he would knock the apartheid where it was weak. One would check his production, How Long, The Schoolgirl and the Taximan, Poor Mama and the Load. He was that greatest writer who had a greatest influence in his writing in terms of acting, in terms of writing music. His music would appeal directly into the hearts and the suffering of the masses of South Africa. And he was well received wherever he was going to. He would make many halls full up. During that era, theater was the best theater to fight against apartheid. One would check the footprints of Mbongeni Ngema, the footprints of Papa G, Darlington Michaels, Macintosh. You know, that influence and the style of writing he gave us as upcoming actors. Even today, we are still following the trends and the foottracks of Gibson Kente. You would check the productions of Mbongeni Ngema. They have that influence. You would check the productions of Darlington Michaels. They have that influence. You would check my own production, both as a writer and a director. There is an element of Gibson Kente, which I have also had to pass to actors like Jack Novuka. I had to pass that influence to Nondumi Sozweni. I had to pass that influence to Pilile Waka, Siabulela Ngeu, Tembile Vatu. You know, those actors, even today, they are still the pillar of cultural development, not only in our society, but also to other countries like Switzerland, Sweden, where I've performed together with ATR in Switzerland, and, you know, working with NACTED, which is National Community Theatre for Development Network. The theatre, to me, it's a spiritual weapon of which we can be able to utilize it to fight against corruption, to fight against gender-based violence, to fight against all the ills that our country is facing today. We need to utilize that theater in terms of directing, in terms of transferring the skills to the upcoming youth, as we have less institutions to train and develop artists in terms of artistic skills. That is music, that is dance, that is craft. You know, we still have that challenge of lack of infrastructure and resources to promote arts and culture. Not forgetting to thank the institutions like National Arts Council, National Heritage Council, Eastern Cape Provincial Arts and Culture Council, and the present government to give us that little bread, though it's not yet enough for our sustainability and job creation in our country. I wrote and directed My Daughter, My Lover, The Naked Hour, The Life and Times of Nelson Mandela, Rivonia Trial, The Times of King Sabata Dalindyebo, which that production was very much close to my heart. You know, it's not easy to see the king leaving his people and go into exile due to apartheid regime and the subjection of oppression that he received during his kingship. Ukumkani Sabata Dalindyebo, it's one of the greatest kings throughout the world that had to leave his subject and go into exile. That production, it managed to create and expose many artists around O.R. Tambo, as the production was based in theater and also musical. And that production, we have managed to perform it during the Queenstown National Arts Festival. Right now, I am busy writing a production called The Spider Web. Spider Web is a play that reflects on the times and the life of O.R. Tambo. Spider Web, as we call it, O.R. Tambo was like a spider web who would convince academics, who would convince politicians, who would convince people in sport, who would convince people in churches to come together. And O.R. Tambo had that power of reaching out to all the sectors of the community. As such, he mobilized sanctions against South Africa. That was one of the weapons that made the South African government to starve and be able to listen to demands of the African people. Through those ideas and those idols, I think we have a lot to learn as artists, to leaders such as Robert Sobukwe, Oliver Tambo, Stephen Bantu Biko, Nelson Mandela, and the host of the other unsung heroes, both who died inside the country and those who died outside the country. And even today, I believe theater is the greatest weapon that can be able to put this country into an international map that could be able to educate the outside world about our history and our indigenous knowledge. Having wrote such a powerful play based on the life and times of Ukumkani, Ajonghlanga, it made me, Ajonghlanga, yikumkani endiyihloniphe nendiyithanda, the way I respect the Royal House of Abatembo. I had that obligation to write that production. And out of that production, it made me to be close to the Royal House Yabatembo. And it made me to be close to Ukumkani Azwelbanzi, Ukumkani Wabatembo ophetheyo ngoku. With such a respect, I was given an opportunity to develop a youth yasebumbane by Ukumkani Uzwelbanzi. Madiba, ndiyakubulela ngethuba owandinika lona lokwazi ukusebenza nabaThembu under the royal leadership yasebumbane. As such, that play is still shelved to be continued in the near future. With respect, Azwelbanzi. As an actor, writer, and director, I worked in association with Skin Sipoko and a number of artists at Amtata Community Arts Center. That was an open opportunity which I was given by Mr. Sipoko, where I produced number of plays at the Arts Center, touring O.R. Tambo in various institutions. Those are technicons, schools, universities, trying to influence the youth in schools that not all of them are going to become scientists. Not all of them are going to become doctors. There is a career and there is a future in terms of arts and culture. That is dance, that is acting, that is music. But the environment in which we live in is too brown. Is too brown in this sense, we don't have factories around O.R. Tambo. We don't have theater schools in O.R. Tambo. We do have schools, but the greatest challenge is that the teachers who are teaching arts and culture are the teachers who were trained to teach general practitioners in teaching. Not specifically, they are trained in terms of teaching, acting, teaching, dancing. Therefore, our influence in going into those schools, we are developing that little influence they have in order to develop the arts and culture through school workshops, through performances, through training in arts management, through training in arts administration, through training in directing, through training in choreography, because arts and culture will always be the voice of the voiceless, and it is the holy ground where truth is being told for the development and the weaponry to develop mind.